The vice president said accounting had a significant increase and the smartest manager, the simplest tax returns, the tiniest indemnity, the earliest catalogs, the most irritating payroll, the briefest survivors, the tallest translations, and he said welcome back to the economic and financial world in our new fiscal year. This year we had the highest corporate survivors, the poorest translations in the forest, the warmest but most dishonest employees the company had seen, the biggest profits for supervisors, the poorest payroll, and the safest validity tests and the quickest board of directors. But we did survive the obscenities and other minor problems with identity theft. The department I worked for the longest was Human Resources, where I succeeded in guiding us through the weakest economy, because I had the smartest and most lucky income tax preparers, who were always welcome, and the finest co-workers. Our corporate chairman said part-time payroll work was hazardous, that we had the steepest decline in income this quarter, as well as the quickest increase in applications and the closest and safest profits, without getting to the obscene level, and the president agreed. Our CEO was not dishonest, but he was the warmest, richest man in the department, and also the richest and the cleanest, and no one protested his applications for identity cards. And he had the closest dealings with his employees and the earliest meetings, and he was the tallest, too. The protesters temporarily survived the deepest troubles they had ever had, but they were irritating in the purest economical sense, and some of them were the meanest people, and the police who dealt with them I think were the fairest, considering the hazards, so the protesters were lucky. The corporation had many supervisors as well as supervisory meetings, and our survivors were the quickest, got there the soonest, were the most honest, had the deepest commitment, the safest records, the quickest increases in salary that were significantly increased, and had the warmest coffee. The dishonest comptroller was irritating, but the tiniest changes in the maintenance of our accounting department, where the controller told the tallest tales, and the patent office, while economical, succeeded in making lots of translations and maintaining good work records. Our president and CEO would say the hardest and yet funniest things to us when he spoke to Human Resources about indemnity. And he had the highest praise during the visit since the Human Resources Department had the fewest errors and the easiest location for applications. The supervisors said the CEO was succeeding significantly because he had the fewest losses, the safest workplace, the deepest pockets, and temporarily the most full-time workers. And he could identify places to improve payroll in the simplest manner. I was the quickest to read the manifest reports at headquarters, and I succeeded in maintaining supervision, although the translator there had about the loneliest look I'd ever seen, and he was the tallest guy in the company, and our financial gains were the happiest, almost obscene. Stockholders were frightened and irritated at the financial news, which had required IDs for all employees the earliest and fastest possible, and if the company would survive, tax returns would succeed to be the fairest as well. Corporate management supervisory positions have had the clearest survival rate, and they have had the slowest significant growth ever with the purest numbers. But they are frightened at the prospects of the slowest growth. The corporate chairman and vice president required identification cards, or ID cards, and significantly we had the luckiest quarter, very lucky in terms of profits, but it was for the briefest, shortest time, and the department began to hire workers part-time, as opposed to full-time, which was the purest sign of the slowest growth this fiscal year. Our HR department is the finest, fastest, biggest, and they produce reports the soonest and in the fullest manner. But I wish they would quit molesting other departments in the workplace and requiring identification badges for minor changes in department level. But maybe it's only temporary. Our board of directors told the HR supervisor that they were irritated at having the slowest financial increases and the heaviest visitor flows, which translate into less valid claims, or validity of claims. And supervisors were come down on the hardest. For the briefest time the department had a hazard with FedEx, and this frightened the shareholders, and I felt that the ID badges would weed out dishonest employees, a program that had been in place for the merest 2 weeks. But we had the longest and the smartest increase in growth that frightened our competitors in corporate. It was only a minority of our HR division that required us to manage supervision changes in earnest, and the quickest we could get it done. The less frightening it would be to HR, and the translation is that the FedEx shipments need to go out the quickest, without validity checks in earnest. This was the fastest the manager had succeeded in checking out the validity of the hazards, and it was the briefest time that the shareholders had the strongest quarter for the corporation, honestly, and the fairest supervisors. Human Resources has the oldest ID program, the strangest employees, the tallest and brightest accountants, and they have survived an obscene amount of hazards and difficulties, honestly. But the slightest troubles do not faze them, so the soonest you can get transferred there, the better. I filed my patent in the last fiscal period, and I was working full-time. But what frightened me the easiest was when I succeeded so easily in getting the patent, as a significant number of people are survivors, and the soonest we have the fullest departments, the better for us. We have the safest and oldest programs. Our dips in growth have been the weakest and shortest in history. We have the finest financial condition in the industry. So I think we are superior. We have the deepest team, and maybe the luckiest company succeeds. C61. There were protesters outside FedEx the previous fiscal year, but none were protesting the high income taxes we paid, which was the slightest bit irritating. But protesters are always welcome to the company, as we give them temporary IDs. Which is an irritation, and you know the company dislikes it. While the Human Resources Department is the newest, and some say the meanest, they are the most economical, and it's the department that has the safest record, the lowest rate of turnover, the earliest reports, the fewest losses, so they are superior to the rest of the departments, is how I translate it. If you can identify the reasons for their success, the board of directors wants to translate the report into being the cleanest, finest, deepest report, with the heaviest analysis. But a minority of the board were frightened at the economic signs and wondered whether we would survive the slightest turning down of the economy, and the protesters were coming back.